The following production is part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network.
Greetings, boarders, and welcome to Board with Video Games, the gaming podcast that strives for the right balance of coverage for games you play on your table and on your television. You can think of us as the Lisa Simpson and Ralph Wiggum of gaming podcasts. We're a proud member of the PSVG Podcast Network and now thrilled to be part of the Dice Tower Network as well. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle, and joining me on this co-op adventure, the guy who does not choo-choo-choose me no matter how much I want him to. Josh, how are you doing this evening?
I am great, I think. I'm here. Did you say Dice Tower Network?
I did say Dice Tower Network.
Okay. I just wanted to double check that. I have a funny Ralph Wiggum story, but it needs to be saved for PSVG DLC because it happened in an adult aspect of my life.
Okay.
I just leave people wondering what that means.
Become a patron on PSVG's Patreon, and you can maybe someday find out what that exactly means. So speaking though of The Simpsons briefly, fan of The Simpsons? Do you still watch The Simpsons? They just got really good for up to their 32nd season. I
know, it's crazy. I grew up with The Simpsons, but I'm old enough to have had to have made the choice at one point. The Simpsons and The Cosby Show run at the same time.
I feel like you made the wrong choice.
Well,
as history has shown out.
I grew up on The Cosby Show before The Simpsons. Simpsons came after The Cosby Show had already been running. And that was I still love The Cosby Show. It teaches a lot of great lessons. Unfortunately, it has this negative connotation now. We know, we don't know if we're supposed to like it or not. So
it seems like he wasn't taking the lessons being taught on the show.
No, for sure. That comes down to the art and artist kind of thing again.
Right, which we talk
about. But yeah, I grew up on The Simpsons. I stopped watching at a certain point though. It eventually just became this, to me, it just felt like the same show. Mm-hmm. After season 16 or 18 or something. I don't remember what season I stopped, but there was an age where when I still wanted to watch cartoons, they were more age appropriate cartoons that were out. Not that Simpsons isn't adult, but I just kind of outgrew it.
Right. I think The Simpsons is interesting because I know there was a time in my life, and I can remember events in my life that happened prior to The Simpsons being on television, but I don't really ever remember The Simpsons not being on television. I logically know that this memory I had from when I was 5 obviously happened before The Simpsons were on TV.
Right.
But in general, when I think about what I was watching on television or what generally I was into, I wasn't someone who watched The Simpsons, but The Simpsons were always there. I would have it on in the background. I remember in college, often a group of us in my residence hall, you can tell I worked in housing because I call it a residence hall, not a dorm. Not a dorm. We would go to the Union and we would get food and we would bring it back and we sit in our lounge and we watch The Simpsons together as a group. These are the things that I remember about The Simpsons. And I was in spoiler alert, my 20-year high school reunion is this summer. That was a long time ago that I was in college, right? So it's interesting that The Simpsons have kind of always been there, even though I really have very few specific memories outside of that one of them. It just always kind of been there.
Yeah. I think I feel the same way. I don't remember. It's crazy how long they've been on TV.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of burying potentially the lead. Hey, the Dice Tower Network, eh?
Yeah. So, hey, if anyone was listening that joined because we're now on the Dice Tower Network, we do this at the beginning of every podcast. We talk about not board games or video games. So if you haven't shut it off already, this is just the opener.
Right. Don't worry. It only lasts a couple minutes. It's not.
So we recorded last week and we knew that we would be joining, but we didn't let people in. So the day after we recorded and the day before the episode came out,
that's when it was announced.
Dice Tower kind of went on and, spelled board BORED with video games. And they released the info. They tweeted about us, which was nice. We got our first like negative comment like right away.
Made it! Yay!
So if you're listening, stick with us a little bit longer.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, Kyle and I have been, I'm talking to the people now, I guess, trying to become a part of the Dice Tower Network for like over a year now. It's been over a year.
Yeah.
And, we talked to Tom and we were just waiting a little bit till they were ready to announce. And, he got back in touch with us. And I think we're just excited to be part of this like global phenomenon that is known as the Dice Tower.
Well, I mean, it really is a representation of like our two loves, right? Like we have been with PSVG forever. Like long before Board with Video Games existed, PSVG existed. And that's where, our video game heart lies. And then the Dice Tower is where our board game heart lies. So being part of both of these networks kind of is like the perfect representation of our show as a whole. So we're
really does fit.
So yeah. All right. But hey, that's enough of the fun beginning stuff before we actually talk about games and all those good things. Let's get to the meat of the show. So thanks so much for joining us this week. As always, if you have any feedback, questions, suggested topics, hit us up at Board with VG on Twitter or check out all of our awesome posts over on Instagram, also Board with VG. As I mentioned briefly, we are a proud part of the PSVG network, and PSVG is on Patreon. We're really thrilled with the support you've given us there thus far. So if you'd like to monetarily support what we do, you can find us on patreon.com/PSVG. But the most important thing is just that you listen and maybe share our show with someone who you think might enjoy it as well. And as we just talked about, we are now a member of the Dice Tower Podcast Network, which is thrilling for us. So if you enjoy our conversations about board games and you'd like to dive deeper into that world, we encourage you to check out the Dice Tower Podcast, as well as the other members of the network. No matter what type of board games you play or enjoy, there's going to be a podcast over there for you. So enough of this housekeeping segment. Josh, let's get to some of that big news in the tabletop world.
Well, let's start with, I don't know if you would say this is a huge announcement or an interesting one. But Matt Leacock and Eggert Spiel Games have come together to bring us Era Medieval Age. This is from DicetowerNews.com, and I'm just going to read a little bit about it. So, Eggert Spiel has announced Era Medieval Age, a new game from designer Matt Leacock. Not only is Era being pitched as a spiritual successor to Roll Through the Ages, but also the first roll and build game. So in Era, players will be using three-dimensional pieces, churches, farms, mills, castle walls, etc., to build up medieval towns on their personal boards. Dice represent different classes of medieval society, and Era is made even more challenging as players interact with each other in ways such as extortion, scorched earth, and, of course, disease. The other piece of the announcement is that Era Medieval Age marks the start of a series of roll and build games from Matt Leacock and Eggert Spiel. No specifics are provided about other games, but Era is planned to debut at Gen Con later this year. So, for people who don't know, it's for the first roll and build, which is a spin-off, I would say, of roll and write, or reimagining. It's also designed for 1 to 4 players. I should mention that. So I guess, do you think this is different enough from roll and write to be considered a different category of game?
Have you looked at any of the pictures of the game on Board Game Geek?
I didn't, but I saw an article that had pictures of it before.
Right.
So I think it reminds me of the pieces from Grim Forest, right? Where like you build like they're like 3D model pieces.
Yeah, a little bit. I think this is going to be different enough, and I'm really interested in what exactly this is going to encompass, because it sounds like that they have really fleshed this game genre, if you would, out, right? Because they've talked about, there's a video that you can check out on Board Game Geek about Era, and it sounds like this is basically going to be a series of games. It sounds like there's going to be 3 games in this series, that this game already has 2 expansions that are already done that will fit in the box. So there will be trays in the box already for these. And that the second game in the series, at least the base game, it sounds like for the second game, is already done. It's called Era Bronze Age, but the the base games won't be compatible. Like each game will get expansions, it sounds like, of the 3. So It seems like this is something they're really getting into and wanting to jump on the train. It looks really interesting. I can't decide what I feel about the presentation of it, though, because I look at the components and I look at that board with like the little houses and almost like they're different shaped, like almost you're playing like Blokus or Tetris or however you want to think of it. Like they're different shaped to fit in that board. And you got to kind of figure that out. Like it's an interesting thing. It's not very often, and why I thought this was a cool thing to talk about. It's not very often that we get this is a new style of game. Like this style of game doesn't exist yet, supposedly.
Well, yeah. So like it's weird. The board kind of looks like a cribbage board a little bit, which is odd. But it's very reminiscent of Tiny Towns. To be honest with you, like when you play Tiny Towns, you have this board. So instead of these slots where you put the buildings, you have squares, and you're putting cubes in certain patterns to build a 3D like representation of the building you're building, and they have to fit in this certain radius. So it's actually pretty similar looking to this, except I'm going to guess in this game you don't have to match a certain pattern to build a certain building.
Right.
It's probably a different aspect to that, but it's like cribbage married Tiny Towns, and a board game came out of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think that if if this is a game that potentially sounds interesting, if you like Matt Leacock as a designer, who I definitely do, I think he's done some really excellent games. I'm a big fan of a lot of his things. This is one of those things that I'm intrigued by, but I would want to play before I buy, just because there's like 100 like little pieces, like individually, like little sculpted buildings. Have you seen the MSRP on this?
No.
It's $90.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So it looks cool, or I shouldn't say cool. It looks interesting. The concept I'm generally down with is something seems new and unique. The visuals don't have it totally won me over, but I'm like, well, maybe it would be good. But I trust in the designs of Matt Leacock, so it makes me want to try it. But $90 is a steep ask when there's supposedly nothing else like this to compare it to,
Yeah. I don't are they charging that because it's unique? Because look at Discover Lands Unknown. Like, you can't just come out with a high MSRP because the game is unique. Like, those are 3D printed pieces, and like 3D models are getting cheaper and cheaper by the day. So I'm not sure where that cost is coming from. Right. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, we still have a little bit till Gen Con.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, there's 100+ miniature sculptures in it, and the sculpts look pretty good, so it's not too bad. I think, there's a lot of people who suggest, like, when you get to these price points of like, oh, it's 1 to 4 players, so could you release a 2 version, variant of the game for half the price, and all of these other ideas, which might make me a little more willing to jump in. This is something, though, that I would definitely want to play at a convention. It sounds like it's going to be released at or playable at Gen Con, one of the two, right?
Yeah, Gen Con, yeah.
So I think this is definitely something that if I was going to Gen Con, I would definitely want to sit down and give a shot for sure. But yeah, there's a lot of it. I'm cautiously optimistic about this one.
Very cool. All right, let's move to the next story. The next story. Emerson Matsuuchi and the folks at Plan B Games have announced the final game in the Century trilogy. That's Century: A New World. So let's see. I'm going to go over some info, and we'll see what we have here. So each game in the series has been set in a different time period and region of the world, and has featured the core mechanic of resource management and trading. Once again, this is from Dice Tower News. Spice Road is based around card selection and hand management. Eastern Wonders introduced a modular board and pick up and deliver to the series. And now A New World will use worker placement and is set in 16th century North America. Now, this is the interesting part. So I have Century and then Century Golem Edition and Eastern Wonders. I haven't played Eastern Wonders yet. But the thing about Eastern Wonders was you can play it by itself or you can play it with Century Spice Road. And now Century New World can be played by itself or mixed and matched with the other 2 games in the series. So technically there's 4 different ways you can play this game.
It's a lot of ways.
Yeah, which is cool if it works in all 4 ways. I'm not quite sure what we're getting ourselves into. I wish I could talk more on Eastern Wonders to kind of give a little bit of a hint on because it's such a departure from Century Spice Road. It's like a different style of game. It's worker placement and movement style game. So it's much different than your essentially like card drafting from Spice Road. But something I love, it's like $24.99, and the components are awesome. The pieces are great. The art is fantastic. So do you have any interest in this game at all? Is it on your radar? Did you pick up any of the other Century games?
I don't have any of the Century games, but I always look at them because you talk so highly of them. And to clarify, at this point, is Century like your favorite game series for board games?
I gotta, I want to say yes, but because I haven't played Eastern Wonders, like that could change. I could swing that like real easy.
So I know obviously you love Spice Road, you love Gollum Edition, and Gollum Edition you cannot mix, correct? Or is it basically Spice Road just so theoretically you could?
I mean, you probably could, but they tell you to include Spice Road.
Okay, so why haven't you played Eastern Wonders then?
It just hasn't come to the table, I guess. I want to, but now like we just picked up Viticulture, and that's a game that my wife has been wanting to play for a while. So that's like next, and then we got Wingspan, and like Wingspan trumped any game I have, and Eastern Wonders is going to be a game that my wife and I sit down to play 2-player first, and like the last few opportunities we've had to play games have been, for the most part, like extra people since I've gotten Eastern Wonders, like more than 2 people. So maybe I should we're going to try to get Viticulture out on Valentine's Day. So maybe I can try to get Eastern Wonders to follow that, or maybe come before it, because it'll probably be easier to play.
Excellent. So, is Emerson like one of your favorite designers at this point?
I think so. I mean, they have Spectre Reps at my local FLGS pre-owned, which is where I got Viticulture actually pre-owned. So I might just go buy Spectre Apps so I can say that I've also played it.
Right.
I just can't talk about how much I love Gollum Edition without worrying about making people sick of hearing it. It's
like we talked about Dead of Winter.
Yeah. To me, Century Gollum Edition or Spice Road, it's the perfect game to introduce to new people. It's easy to learn. It plays great. It's a little long-winded with 4, but it still plays great at 4. And it's beautiful. Like, it's some of the best art in board games that I have seen, played, or owned. But also art is subjective. So like, I can't like tell you that you're going to love the art, because you might not. And Century Spice Road is plain. I get why people complain about it. But the thing I didn't like was when they announced Century New World, instead of people being excited, it's just the internet full of people going, when am I getting Eastern Wonders Gollum Edition? When's the next Gollum? Like, you're not going to get another Gollum Edition. It was a one-off. They didn't even mean to make it public. They did it because it was a con special and it got so much love.
Right.
Like, be excited for the new games. So.
Yeah, I think the thing that still gets me about this game is like, Century Spice Road is, I think right now you can get it on Amazon for $30, I think.
Yeah.
And, like you said, you may or may not dig the art, like that's fine. But like these games, like component wise, like the way they look, like the production value of them just seems super quality for what you're getting in the box for the price that you're getting.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
All right. So is this Origins? Is that what this one is shooting for? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So not
Origins.
too long to wait. This just, couple months. Well, June, right? Or is it June? Is that right?
I think it's June. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or Gen Con. Is Gen Con in June?
No, Gen Con's like August.
Okay. So before we move to the next story, this is where I will interject. For those listening and interested, Board of Video Games and Kevin Austin from Play Some Video Games will be at a board game convention in what's today? In a week and a half. On the 23rd and 24th, we will be at TotalCon, which is 20-minute drive from my house in Marlborough, Massachusetts. And we will be, as far as plans are, we will be there as press, which is exciting. We have assistants, our wives. But as it stands, we will be interviewing, or at least sitting down and talking to Emerson Matsuuchi, which I'm very excited about. So, if you guys have any questions, please send us an email. I'll play some video games. No, boredwithvideogames.com, or DM us on Twitter, and let us know your questions for Emerson. Remember, we don't know what he can talk about, but we have a Metal Gear game on the horizon. We have Century: A New World. If you look him up, he also just put out another new game. It's more on the kids' side of games, but he's still out there. He's making plenty of content. So obviously, I'll be doing some research and asking him what I want to know. So let me know what you guys want to know about Emerson. And as the next week or a few days come by, I'll start tweeting about who else we may be sitting down with if you have questions, because I believe Jason Tagmeyer of Butt Shy Games will be someone we'll also be speaking with. And if any of you guys are tabletop RPG fans, there are a few bigwigs in that area as well. So if you have general questions or specific ones, I'll try to get some info on who and when and what will be there. So keep your eyes on our social media.
Excellent plug.
Yes, right in the middle. And our last story is literally number one on the hotness right now. So it's straight out of the hotness. And we have, so I'm going to use Kyle's words on this one. Unlike EA, Fantasy Flight has no issues making Star Wars games and has announced another entry. This is Star Wars Outer Rim. Star Wars Outer Rim is a full-fledged game. This is a $65 game. So we're looking at just fresh off of a Lord of the Rings announcement, we have a Star Wars announcement, which also was on the hotness. And now we see following suit, far from the dice. No, this is from Fantasy Flight's website. Far from the shadows of Coruscant skyscrapers lies the dangerous Outer Rim. To many citizens, the galaxy's edge represents a hive of scum and villainy that is better left ignored. But to the scoundrels of the galaxy, the Outer Rim represents opportunity. If you can survive the harsh conditions of the edge of space, you may find yourself emerging from the grime of the underworld as one of the most famous scoundrels in the galaxy. So I'm going to describe to you what this game looks like, and I'm interested in what your thoughts are, Kyle.
Okay.
So it looks like half of a Halo ring, if you're familiar with Halo. It is the Outer Rim. It is defined by planets. And if you are familiar with the Firefly board game, to me, this screams reprint. It is, the map is very much different. The Firefly map is huge and square and takes up a whole table. This is a unique board for sure, but it appears to be the same premise as Firefly. You have a ship, you are a captain, you hire a crew, you have cargo spaces, and you have jobs, and you're trying to avoid bounty hunters as you're trying to fly around the Outer Rim to become the next Lando, as you were. So what do you know about the game, and what do you think about the theme? And, well, not the theme, but the idea of it.
So here's my, for better or for worse, I don't want to say kryptonite, but for lack of a better word, kryptonite when it comes to board games. I can read the description of a game and be like, I don't get it. I'm really, really good at that. And that's kind of what Star Wars Outer Rim does for me. I read it and I say, okay, that seems cool, I guess. Then I go what other people have to say. And it seems like there's kind of a discussion happening of, is this Firefly a not reprint per se, but a re-implementation with some refinement of the Firefly system?
Yeah.
Some people have said it seems like Merchants and Marauders.
Okay.
Some people have even compared it to Zaya, Legends of a Drift system. So either way, all three of those games, none of those are bad. So that seems good, right?
Yes.
The thing I always worry about with Fantasy Flight games, and here's always my concern with them. Number one, these games tend to never end, right?
Yes.
There's expansion after expansion after expansion after expansion, which, if you like the game, I think is excellent, that it keeps you invested in that universe. You can keep playing it, having a good time with it, having, you have an initial $65 investment, but then maybe you get to keep having fun with it for $20 later down the road rather than 65 again and 65 again. So I think that could be good for someone like me, who granted this is playable solo, I believe. My wife is not a huge Star Wars fan, doesn't really care about this type of game. I have very few people that I'm close friends with where I live or play games with that care at all about Star Wars. And I feel like this is a game that, because of you have to like the theme, or the theme is going to be an obstacle to getting people in if they're not into Star Wars. Yes. Whereas Firefly, like, people are like, oh, wasn't that one show that one time? They don't have a lot of other things associated with it to be like, well, I'm not going to play a Firefly game. And I kind of feel the same way too, just with, when you look at anything that's themed after like Dungeons and Dragons or Lord of the Rings or anything like that, those could be obstacles. And I feel like that might be true in this case. I think the board looks cool. I think Fantasy Flight always does a nice job of producing things that look nice and look cool. I also get very confused when I look at all their stuff, because there's like 12 things on the player board all the time.
Yeah.
Which I don't think the complexity is bad. I think it adds replay value. It adds to the ability to play the game often and get good at it. It just, for me, as someone who doesn't play a lot of this style of game, it really makes the barrier to entry seem high and a bit scary. So I think it's cool. Like, I think they have done a great job of churning out very high quality games. Like, most of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games, I think people really enjoy, and I'm confident this will probably be another entry in that genre for them, but I don't know that it is a game I will be picking up. How about you, sir?
I 100% agree with you. I really want this game, but like, this isn't a game that I'm going to sit down with my wife and play, because she wouldn't. She's like a casual Star Wars fan, and it's like the new Star Wars, not the old Star Wars. So I think that speaks to a lot of like casual Star Wars fans. Like, I would love to play this game. Like, it looks great. I might be tempted just to buy it for for an occasion where I find out like 3 of my friends want to get together and play a heavy game. Like, I might be like, okay, I've been waiting for the Star Wars one. Or maybe I'll just go to the game store and buy it on the way to someone's house. But it's a game I really want to play. Like, for me, I've been missing that Star Wars game from my collection. That game that I can play with everyone. I don't have that Star Wars game. So this seems more in line with because all the other ones are larger, bigger, more intense games. Like Armada, Imperial Assault, Legion, X-Wing, all these games are like, even Rebellion I wanted to get to play with my wife because it's supposed to be a great, awesome 2-player game, but it's just that theme. Like, she's like, oh, I gotta play as either the Rebels or the Empire, and then I'm fighting you? I'm like, yeah, sorry. Like, it's just 1v1. Same reason why I can't play like Keyforge with her or Magic, because like, we prefer, if we're going against each other, it needs to have more than the element of back and forth beating each other up. There has to be a little bit more content to it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, but I want it real bad. So we'll see if I get it. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, but Fantasy Flight definitely, every year there's something Star Wars from them every single year.
Yeah, they're killing it, and they do good content. I haven't heard any complaints about their Star Wars games.
Yeah, people really do seem to enjoy them very, very much. All right, so we're going to
shift over to video game news. You probably could have edited that out if I didn't say anything.
Yeah, I totally could have, but then you started talking. So, sorry, dear listener, I'm really not feeling well, so I keep having to go off mic here so I don't cough horribly into the mic. So I apologize if edits and stuff are weird this week. My bad. I apologize. So, all right. So we're going to transition to some video game news this week. And we didn't talk about it all last week because, last week was talking about our games that we played. But Apex Legends, a new game from the folks over at Respawn, was announced and released last Monday. So a little, be about not quite 2 weeks ago when you listen to this fine podcast. And Apex Legends, which takes place in the Titanfall universe, is, that one of those battle royale games that are all the rage these days. And on the first day, in the first 8 hours, they hit 1 million players. And then it was 1 million players after the first 8 hours. And then in the first day, they hit 2.5 million players. Well, they have now announced that they have hit 25 million unique players in 1 week with more than 2 million concurrent users.
That's insane.
at their peak. And as we're recording this, there is a Twitch Rivals tournament going on right now for Apex Legends. When right before we started recording, there was 700,000 people almost watching Apex Legends on Twitch. And PUBG, because I had looked at it just for funsies, PUBG was, what did I say, 28th?
23rd.
23rd, something way down there. So yeah, so PUBG had fallen off precipitously, had like 3,000 people watching it, and Apex Legends had 6 or 7 or 8, a whole lot of people watching. Now, granted, a lot of the big PUBG streamers were playing in this Apex Legends tournament. The question will be in 2 weeks if those big PUBG streamers are still playing Apex Legends. So, Josh, you and I have had a chance to play Apex Legends, and I don't necessarily want to talk a ton about our playing experience, but here's a game, a free-to-play game, published ostensibly by EA, because it's made by Respawn. There's loot boxes in it, but they're only for cosmetics. It costs nothing to get in. They didn't, do any announcement of this ahead of time. It leaked like 2 days before they were announced it. Is this just the way to make video games these days? Is this just the thing to do now?
It's kind of crazy. Like, as you guys were talking, I'm like, we thought Battle Royale games came out of the woodwork after Fortnite. Like, what a company's going to think now? Everyone's going to put out, that hasn't already put out a Battle Royale game, they're going to think this is the next thing. So, because they're like, no, Battle Royale, it's not going to be able, you can't compete with Fortnite anymore. So let's not make Battle Royale games. And then Call of Duty does good. Call of Duty does well, not good. They do well. And then this thing happens. And it blows everything out of the water. And you have people on all different sides, like people like me who are not good at Battle Royale games, loving this game. You know, people who are great at Battle Royale games, hating this game. Because it's such a weird, I don't know. It's not a hybrid, but I think for me, and I'm curious if people share the same opinion. When I play Apex Legends, I don't feel like I'm playing a Battle Royale game. In fact, there's times I get so caught up in it, I forget I'm in a Battle Royale game, and like the wall is closing in on me because it feels more like Titanfall or like Halo multiplayer. It doesn't feel like a Battle Royale game to me.
Well, and the interesting thing too is like them releasing this game, the number of concurrent players in Titanfall 2 has like more than doubled since Apex Legends was released.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like playing Titanfall. And then it just kind of adopted that Overwatch system that works.
Right.
Which is like, I agree. Like you do have to buy 2 characters. You can unlock them as well though. Mm-hmm. But there is that's the only thing that you could technically have to pay for a character if you didn't want to wait to unlock.
Right.
But I mean, like, you have a great loot system. You can even like find those loot crates in the game and punch them open to get more gear,
you can.
which is really fun. But and you earn it. You earn it as you're playing through the game. I think they are going to do Battle Pass, though. I think I read.
Yep, starting in March, I believe they're going to have one.
So there will be some type of monetization to continue being. I don't know what it's going to entail. Like, I don't feel like I need to buy a Battle Pass in Fortnite.
Right.
But yeah, it's just to get more cosmetics and like XP boosts and perks like that. So I don't know the formula, but they definitely stumbled onto a big hit.
Yeah, it is interesting because, this is, people liked Titanfall and loved Titanfall 2, it seems. And this seems like I'm really happy for Respawn because I don't feel that either one of those games got the love that they should have. Yeah. And now, this game really seems to be hitting the stride with people and hitting the mark with people. And I'm not a Battle Royale fan. Like, I don't in general enjoy Battle Royale games. I really like playing Apex Legends. I have a ton of fun with it. And I think a different podcast said this, and I forget who it was that said this, so I apologize. But they basically said this is like I think it was on the Game Informer show. They talked about like this was the Blizzardification of Battle Royale. Yeah. That they took the genre, cut and trimmed out all of the stuff that doesn't work, streamlined it, made it like bright, fun. You have like the character, they made it about the characters, which is what people care about. They care about characters more than they care about overall narrative. And they really kind of drove all of that home, like with the ping system, with the fact that currently you do have to play in groups of 3, which I understand why some people don't like that. And I know some people have had poor experiences with that. All of my experiences with it so far, surprisingly, have been great. I have not had any teammate yet that was random that wasn't trying their best to help us win.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I understand people are having different experiences in that. Surprisingly, mine have all been super positive related to it. And yeah, they just really did a nice job of making the game fun to play and making it, I think the shooting feels good. The quote unquote ultimate abilities are good, but not like game breaking. Not like, oh gosh, we are just hosed now because this person has their ult. Like it still is a balanced, fun thing. I think there's some weapon tweaks that could happen. I think there are certain weapon combinations that are the best, but that's always going to be the case, right? Like if you balance something else, then something else is going to become the best. So it's never going to be perfect. I think overall it's pretty good, but I do think that like the Peacekeeper, I think is just kind of like the shotgun to have. And I think having a shotgun at all times is really important, along with then whatever other gun you want to have. But I think, and like the Mozambique, not great, not an ideal gun, but by having it around, there's always shotgun shells around. So that's good. So I like that. But yeah, they definitely have I shouldn't say stumbled upon. They worked really hard and created a really cool game that people are having a lot of fun with. So big props to the people over at Respawn for Apex Legends, because 25 million people seem to be enjoying their experience with it. Moving on, that guy, Hideo Kojima, he's making that little game called Death Stranding, which looks like, I thought in all the footage we've shown, it looks like you're a package delivery person.
Yeah, it looks like a terrible escort mission.
It really does. It really does. But according to Jordan Vogt Roberts, the director of King Kong, or Kong Skull Island, and the rumored director / confirmed / probably director for the Metal Gear Solid movie.
That's important before you say what you're going to say.
He has said that this game is quote unquote a miracle. He recently got to go visit Kojima Productions and played Death Stranding. And he tweeted out that, quote, "Remember when Fury Road blew you away, but also made you, in the best, most thankful way, ask, WTF, how does this miracle exist? You are not ready," end quote. Now, I'm a huge fan of Fury Road. I love Fury Road. That movie is exceptional. It is so good. And Death Stranding is a game that I think everyone's kind of been like, we've seen a ton of trailers for it. We saw gameplay at E3 last year, and everyone was like, well, what do you actually do? Like, what's happening?
Did we see gameplay? I don't know what we saw. We saw
we saw Norman Reedus walking around with backpacks.
Yeah.
In a game. So that's what we saw.
Yeah.
But apparently, according to Jordan Vogt Roberts, this game is a miracle. Do you take that to the bank for the future Metal Gear Solid director saying that? Does that increase your hype at all around Death Stranding?
Well, I think someone calling Death Stranding a miracle fits the brand for Death Stranding, because no one would ever say that about a video game ever. So it fits the branding. But first of all, he's the director of the Metal Gear Solid movie, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. I loved Fury Road, so that comparison is definitely intriguing.
Right.
I went to see Fury Road with my buddy in the theater, and my hands were on the armchairs for the whole movie. And I looked at him when the movie was over, and I said, that movie was intense. My heart was still beating. Like, my heart rate must have been elevated the whole movie. So, everything I've seen about Death Stranding does not compare to my feelings of Mad Max in theaters, but someone was bound to say something weird about Death Stranding, and this just happens to be, in my opinion, a weird thing to say about a video game.
It is. Maybe it's an omen of it not being good. Like, it's a miracle they're still paying for this. But, I don't really think that's how he meant it, but maybe that's what, it's code for this not being as good as it could be. I'm tending to not believe that be true, but yeah. At this point, my only thing the only thing that is keeping me interested in Death Stranding is my morbid curiosity about what this game is going to be. I have no desire to play it right now. I think that's what it is for almost everyone. It's like, what is this?
Well, the Kojima heads, we'll call them. I'm sure we'll buy this game. I've already pre-ordered it. We'll buy it day one. We'll play it. And I love Kojima. but I mean, for everything I've seen of this game so far, it looks like a headache. I don't want to play it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge Kojima fan. Not because I actively dislike him. I just haven't really played much of Metal Gear.
Okay.
So I'm not like a anti. I just don't have a huge experience with his catalog. Metal Gear is one of the bigger gaming holes that I have. But just in general, like as far as being a PlayStation guy, as far as the PlayStation exclusives go, this one is pretty far down on my list as far as ones I'm excited about. So yeah, I'm interested. I have the curiosity like you do. I'm like really curious as to what it is. But yeah, not one that is super high on my list. And remind me maybe later. I have a story about Fury Road of when I saw it in the theater that I want to share.
Nice.
Might be here, might be on the podcast, might be off the podcast. But I have a funny story. All right, so almost last story. We'll kind of go through this one a little quickly because it's more like it's disappointing than anything. But a Pennsylvania lawmaker has proposed a 10% tax on violent video games, basically calling it a sin tax. So any video game that is rated M or AO, which we know that AO games typically don't make it into stores anyway, but any game that's rated M would have a 10% tax on top of whatever the Pennsylvania state taxes, which I think is 6%. So basically, it's ostensibly a $60 video game would now be $70 if it was rated M. And basically, the person who introduced the bill, who is State Representative Chris Quinn, has said that, quote, one factor that may be contributing to the rise in and intensity of school violence is the material kids see and act out in video games, end quote. So the reason I bring this up is because it's really, really disappointing to see because we had a whole, especially if you're new to the podcast, we did a whole episode, 50 episodes ago, where we were talking about violence in video games and whether or not video game violence actually has an impact. According to the research that exists that is academically supported, what impact does violent video games have on kids and acting out in violence and things like that? And I think we pretty conclusively on that show talked about how violent video games themselves are not what the problem is. So it's really disappointing that stories like this continue to make the news and that representatives continue to get information that is not supported fully by academic research about, the impact of violent video games on kids. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't no impact. And that was, I think, what we talked about is that there is an impact, but it's not what is causing the kids to act out. It is, right. If kids have a propensity to violence, they then have a propensity to be attracted to or want to participate in violent video games. It's not the video games are not the precursor to that. They're a result of the propensity the kid already has.
It's a trigger, but anything could be a trigger for the person who has that type of issue.
Right. And the thing that actually shows or the most common resulting thing that increases actually rage is actually bad controls in a game. That is the research is that if a game does not control like you want it to, that actually is what increases a kid or even an adult to act out after playing a video game or act out in rage as a result of a game or anger is actually because of poor controls, not because of the images that they see. So yeah. Anyway.
Well, what bothers me about this is one, they want to call it a sin tax. So that's church and state people. We need to keep them separate. But also, if you view these violent video games as a sin, now you're okay with it as long as you can monetize it. That's probably against most people's beliefs to profit from sin.
Right.
Like, get your story straight. Is it okay as long as you're making money, or is it not okay, period? Like, you got to make a decision, and it's just unfortunate because it's always going to be around, and the first thing people look for once a violent crime happens is, what did this person consume?
Yep.
What can we blame this on? Instead of worrying about the person, they try to, blame the person.
Right.
I'm sorry, Ted Bundy did not play video games, and he was a pretty bad person.
Indeed, and we'll be talking about. Well, actually, I did.
Different one.
I know, but I watched the Ted Bundy tapes too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. We'll talk about that more later, maybe. Anyway, the one thing that always catches me up about this, though, and that makes me slightly feel like, well, it's not a horrible idea, I guess, is that this isn't the first time that there's been a proposal for taxes on video games that are M-rated. And the positive thing about the result of that is that those bills have always said that, hey, the funds from these taxes are going to go to increase or support mental health programs in the state. Now, there's no bill that actually have ever passed. None of them have ever passed. But, mental health funding in most states is really poor, really, really poor. Yeah. So I sometimes get torn about the fact of like, well, it would be nice to increase funding and support for mental health programs in states. Like that would be a good thing. But is this the best way to do that? And I think in my mind, the answer to that is probably not. So
correct. I agree with you.
All right. And then finally, very, very briefly, because it is a developing story as we record, but those rumored layoffs at Activision Blizzard have come to pass in a earnings call today. Activision Blizzard announced that they were going to be reducing their workforce by about 8%. Which would result, based off of numbers of employees, there are about 800 people being laid off from their jobs today. And 800, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
When you hear about, game studios closing down and game developers losing, or doing layoffs, like that's always sad. And it's a sad state of kind of the way game development seems to work right now. But often those are, 40, 50, 60. Sometimes, you'll get 100 or 200, and not to minimize the impact that had on all those individual people, because that's obviously significant to each and every one of them. But 800, like that's a lot of people. Goodness, that's a lot of people. And I think it's, there's a lot of conversations happening on Twitter right now, and I don't think we're necessarily going to comment about whether this is good or bad or what they could have done to avoid it. But I think it is definitely, like I said, we just don't have all the information right now, other than the fact that they have said it is happening, and that there are people on social media who have said they have been laid off and they are no longer employed by Activision Blizzard. And it seems to be mostly in non-game development roles. So it seems like maybe that Bungie split and maybe those esports things are not going quite as well as Activision was hoping. And there's now maybe some redundancies in marketing and things like that as a result of that split with Bungie over Destiny. So heartfelt. I hope things go well for everyone. They land on their feet. We don't claim to have the answers because neither of us have degrees in business.
Nope.
But do you have any thoughts or comments before we move on to our topic of the show, sir?
What do you say? It's a cost of business is what people say. It stinks. But it's nice to see other companies taking to social networking and offering up the fact that they are hiring and looking for talented people, which is always nice to see. And I mean, we'll see where this develops. Obviously, the biggest thing that people are taking away from this right now is their announcement of profits and then cutting people. So that'll be a story that I'm sure we'll hear about over the next week. But I don't want to speculate. Like, it just thinks that many people lost their jobs, and you never want to see that. We're supposed to be the best economy in the world, and we need to get more jobs in here, not cutting jobs.
Yeah. It's definitely, there's definitely some very pointed feelings on social media. If you want to go check out the article, the title of Waypoint's article, I think you'll get a very you get a clear indication about how Waypoint feels about the announcement. But the one piece I will leave you with, Josh, as we move on to our topic of the show, is that you're right. It is super great that developers always reach out when these things happen. They say, hey, we're hiring here. Hey, we're hiring here. Like, we're looking for positions here. There's even like a Google Doc of like connections and jobs, contacts and like things like that anyone can access to see like who's all hiring and who hiring managers are and what positions are available in the world of games. I think the big question is, what does it say that has to exist?
That's true. That's a good question.
With that, we will move on to our topic of the show. If you're listening to this on the day it releases, it's Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to you and yours. If that is a thing you celebrate. My wife is not a fan of Valentine's Day, so I don't celebrate it. But you know what? I still want to talk about some things that we love, because we love loving things, and loving things is fun. So I didn't want to just make it easy, though, and just talk about the things we love. So I have created a list, and then Josh added some to it as well. And we are going to go through and have two options, and we have to pick the thing we love more. And this was actually inspired by Eric Lang on Twitter, had people suggest or give him 2 albums that were like rock or metal albums. And then he said which one he liked better and why. So that's kind of what the inspiration for this was. Is I saw Eric Lang do this on Twitter. I was like, this is kind of cool because you had albums for bands that were like very, very different. And he would still pick things and say like, oh, I like this one over this one. And here's the reason why. So these are much more together. They're much more related topics than some of the albums and things like that he got. But I thought it'd be fun to kind of go through these, pick some things that we love and discuss why we love them. I think we'll just alternate, Josh, if that's cool with you. I'll start with one and then you get to pick one and then we'll kind of go from there. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, this will be fun because I feel like we're going to be an incompatible couple.
Well, having some differences and having, being in balance is important. So if we're all the same on everything, what fun would that be? So I'm just going to start here, Josh, with, the big one when it comes to board games. Yeah. Euros or Ameritrash, Amerithrash, depending on who you talk to. Where does your heart lie? Where does your heart belong?
The opposite of you, because I think I know what yours is. Okay. It's Ameritrash for me, it's not a very fond title. Amerithrash is probably better. I just only for the reason that while I do enjoy some Euros, I find this is a blanket statement that most Euro games are bland and not exciting to me. But they definitely have great mechanics, which I admire. But they're just a little too maybe dense for me is the word I'm going to look for.
Okay. So here's the thing. My partner loves Euro games, adores Euro games.
Did I confuse you and your wife? Is that what I did?
She would play a Euro game over, like, it could have like gray boxes and have like words written on index cards. And if it made her think and made her go through all those processes, she would be 100% down with it. I, on the other hand, would rather not do that.
Okay, I confuse. We've talked about this before, so I just you and your wife.
Okay, yeah, I'm much more on the Ameritrash or Amerithrash side. I much prefer having games that are absolutely oozing with theme. That is a thing that I absolutely adore. It helps captivate me. It helps pull me into the game and be more interested in what's going on there. I don't mind a good heavy Euro from time to time. There are times that I'm definitely in the mood for that, or that I want to have my brain burned a little bit. But in general, my heart belongs to Ameritrash games and probably will always belong to Ameritrash games.
Nice. Okay, so the second one.
And you don't have to go in order if you don't want to. You can go wherever you want.
Oh, I'm going to go in order.
Okay.
I will mix up. I'll forget where we were. And I think I know where you lean on most of these, but I was already wrong on number one. Card drafting or deck building games? Which one do you love more?
So this is a hard one because I like both of these a lot. Anything with cards makes me happy, makes my heart happy. So this was a really challenging one when I put it on there because, sometimes card drafting is an aspect of deck building, depending if you look at it from the perspective of Magic the Gathering. If you're doing a draft, you're drafting cards to then build a deck. Obviously that's not what I mean here when it comes to a deck building board game, but I often associate these things similar. But if I had to go with where my heart truly lied and where my true love is definitely with deck building. Deck building is still my favorite type of game in general. I would love to play any deck builder. I have decided that I've mentioned from time to time and waxed poetic about designing my own board game. I've decided it is 100% going to be a deck builder. And I actually think I know the theme. I'm just going to make it work. So again, theme before mechanics. I think that's probably not the way you're supposed to do these things, but that's cool. But yeah, definitely my heart lies with deck building. Do our hearts align on this one, Josh?
They do. And actually, I love card drafting as well. But I think if I'm like picking Legendary versus Seven Wonders, I go Legendary. But I have love for both of them equally. So maybe if I'm like in Utah, I can have them both. But for the most part, I would have to pick deck building just because I've played a lot of deck building games. There's only been a few that I really didn't like vibe with for the most part. I just really enjoy the the gameplay of deck building. So yeah, deck building all the way for me.
See, here's the interesting thing. When it comes to Seven Wonders versus Legendary, if I have to set it up, I would play Seven Wonders.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the setup alone is a like.
But if the game is already set up, then I would pick Legendary.
Yeah. I mean, I love Seven Wonders, but as people know, I found out we've been playing it wrong for 15 years.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's fine.
I have to revisit it.
All right. So for the next one, and this one is specific to board games, not to video games, even though you could theoretically make it go for both. Does your heart lie with mechanics / mechanisms or theme, Josh?
So to contradict my Ameritrash pick, for me, it's mechanics over theme because, like, there's a game that we're going to talk about and review, Nessos from Yellow, and there is a theme of Greek mythology in the game, but the mechanics are solid enough in that game that you could put any theme over it and it would work just as well. So I like the fact that you could play a game. So like Outer Rim as an example, like you could play a game like Firefly, which the theme is solid for Firefly fans, but the mechanics are good enough to reskin the game. We're not talking like a Monopoly, Fortnite versions. Like we're talking about a game mechanics that are so solid. Like you could take Dead of Winter and make it a Walking Dead game very easily, and I don't think you would lose anything because the mechanics are so strong. I know the theme's similar, but you could do it with like instead of zombies, it's like
you do it with like Aliens,
Bird Box, or Aliens, or something like that, where the mechanics are strong enough that it doesn't have to rely on the theme. So I pick mechanics.
Gotcha. So here's the hard one about this, because like my heart right away says theme. Like that's the answer that my heart says. But I think it says that with the understanding that the mechanics are of at least a certain level, right?
Yeah.
Like ideally the game would be at least good enough that it was kind of worth, like obviously there are games that are published all the time that maybe aren't great, but that's what's hard for me is I can't separate like like if I think of Dead of Winter, like for me, the reason I enjoy the mechanics in that game is because they fit the theme so well. And if I don't know a rule and I think about from a thematic standpoint, how would this rule play out? It's like always right. Like if I go find the answer later. Yeah. So for me, like the mechanics have to be at least, I always just assume the mechanics are going to be good enough. So I just go, oh, well, theme, obviously. But excuse me, at the end of the day, game's got to have mechanics that are good enough. So I think I have to somewhat, when I search deep in my soul, pick mechanics or mechanisms over theme, only because when I pick theme, it's always because the mechanics are good enough. So that's where
this was a BuzzFeed survey. We would be compatible so far.
So far, we would be compatible.
2 out of 3. This is where we're going to change, though.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
You're up, I think, right? Yeah, you're up.
No, I'm not at all.
No?
I just did mechanics / mechanisms.
You did. That was my bad. Okay, Kyle. I'm up. I don't know why I didn't know that. So, gameplay or story. I think that's cut and dry. I don't even have to get into any more detail. Gameplay or story.
Right. And this obviously is
video games and sometimes board games.
Yeah, the intent was to be the bookend to the previous board game question, but looking at it basically from a video game perspective now. And for me, gameplay is king.
Oh, you surprised me.
Yeah, like I play video games because I want a good story, right? Like if the story is good enough, I can forgive some gameplay mistakes and things like that. But if a game is just frustrating to play, no matter how good the story is, it's not going to matter. Like if The Last of Us the story was as good as it is, but the gameplay was horrible, like the combat in The Last of Us isn't the best combat ever, but it's good enough, right? So, but if it was way worse than that, like, oof, that'd be a really tough sell for me. But I also think about, like, I also really, really enjoy like twin stick shooters and games like that have that are wholly gameplay dependent. So for me, I have to go with gameplay just because I play a ton of games that story is basically irrelevant. Like Overwatch, like, yes, there's a story in that game, but it all happens outside the game. It's all about how that game feels to play. That makes me like it as much as that I do. So gameplay is king for me.
I agree. Gameplay is imperative. You could have good story and the gameplay could be terrible, and that makes that game not worth playing. You maybe want to go watch the cinematics or the story of the game on like YouTube, but if you can't tell a story in a video game where people want to continue interacting with it, it's not going to succeed.
Excellent. All right. Next on the list, Josh, do you prefer graphical fidelity? And what I mean by that is basically making games trying to look as realistic and lifelike as possible, or art direction. What is more important to you?
So art direction, I think, is the most important in many aspects, from film to TV to games. So it's tricky because I get why anyone would pick graphical fidelity over the other, but we're looking at like this, for video games at least, this generation of 8-bit games like Celeste.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you imagine if Celeste had to go in the graphical fidelity versus art direction category, and like it wouldn't pass? Like the art direction is what makes that game unique.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, like, it's not going to hold up graphically to its competitors.
Well, right. But what does your heart love? Does your heart love that shiny 4K 60 frame per second realistic person running across a field? Or does it like Celeste?
It does love that. It really does. But I mean, art direction is a vision. Like, the thing about art direction, which is a beautiful thing, is that someone's idea come to life, and you might not love it, but every game has a certain art direction that goes in, and that's what draws people to those games. So while I understand people will never play Celeste because they don't like the art direction, to me, I think that's what makes everything, board games and video games, so unique. So I pick art direction. You
know, I was really trying to get us to diverge at some point here. And, you know, we're about a third of the way through this and we still haven't diverged. Because to me, yeah, absolutely, art direction is 100% the more important thing. When you look at games like, you know, Nex Machina, or you look at anything from, you know, like you look at a game like Bastion and things like that. Like, I really love when there is a direction that a studio goes, and you might like it, you might not, but they buy into it 110%, and they kind of create that whole, hey, like, games are art thing going on, right? I'm a big fan of games that look unique. If a game looks different, it's going to make me go, might not like it, I might love it, but either way, I'm going to have a reaction to it. Whereas, you know, otherwise, when you look at a Far Cry 5 or something like that, I'm like, oh, that looks nice. Like, yeah, looks really nice on an Xbox One X. It looks good. But it doesn't, like, for better or for worse, like, it doesn't blow me away anymore, right? Like, God of War looked really good, but the parts of God of War that I liked were the parts that didn't look like, you know, Montana in Far Cry 5. Like, I liked the parts that were, like, more fantastical. Like, that's the part that really, why when we have the arguments that we would have sometimes about, you know, what looked better, Far Cry 5 or God of War, that's why I went that way, because the art direction to me was better in that game than it was in Far Cry 5. Not that it looked more realistic, but that I thought that the art direction and those parts were better. Granted, you know, there's a whole bunch of other things you could argue about NPCs and characters and how many people you interact with and other things as well. But yeah, definitely art direction is more important.
Nice. Okay. So, Kyle, 1 hour games versus 3 hour games.
So
what do you love?
I love... So this is, you know, where my heart goes when it comes to board games. This is obviously not intended for video games. For board games, my heart loves... My initial answer to this was 1 hour games. But then I realized my answer to that was for games that I don't play very often, or when I'm learning new games, I like when they're shorter. But when I think about, the games that I love, or that the gaming sessions I have loved, it's definitely the 3 hour gaming sessions. So 3 hour games are what my heart desires. How about you, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I could go more than 3 hours, but 3 hour games would be my pick.
I really thought this one would be different on.
There's an appeal to both.
There is,
obviously 1 hour games is appealing to shorter availability. But if I'm in a situation where it's unlimited time available, I pick 3 hour games every time. because it's a social event as well. It's not just a 3-hour board game.
Mm-hmm.
So I prefer that as in the aspect of I love 3-hour games more than I love 1-hour games.
All right. Man, we have just been...
This is good. It means we're growing. We're going to start looking like each other soon, too.
Well, you'd have to gain a significant amount of weight for that to happen.
Well, my metabolism's going to slow down at some point.
Well, yeah. Well, mine did like 10 years ago. So, all right. Moving on. Next category. This is geared towards video games because I don't think we play a lot of solitary board games. So,
yeah,
single player games or multiplayer games. What does your heart desire?
I love playing games with friends, but nothing beats sitting down by myself in the living room for a whole day playing a single player game. Like single player games, I love them. Assuming we're hitting everything else like gameplay and mechanics and some story. I love a single player game. Some of the best stories I've ever read or watched have been single player video games. So, single player games, if I had to pick one.
So, when I talk about why I prefer PlayStation to Xbox, it's because of the exclusives, right? And by far, in the current generation at least, PlayStation exclusives are single-player, narrative-driven games. They're the things that we do. The supposed single-player games are dead, according to PlayStation, is not true. But that being said, I have never turned down an invite from my Overwatch group when I have been online. So I think my actions tell me that my heart truly does desire multiplayer games. No matter where I am in a single player game, no matter what I'm doing, I can save that and come back to that experience. But I think my heart truly still lives, even though I don't do it as often anymore, with multiplayer games. That is where my heart goes. So Josh, I think we had our first diversion.
First. I thought we had a diversion at number 1.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, getting all the way down to number 7 before we had a diversion.
I feel us drifting apart, Josh.
I think we're coming back together in a second.
Okay, we'll see what happens.
Oh, boy. Yep. 2-player games or party games, Kyle?
I mean, I don't have enough friends for party games, so my heart doesn't even know what that's like. So I have to go with 2-player games, and I'm mostly joking about that. I think party games are fun. Party games are just a little hectic for me in general.
Yeah.
So definitely for me, 2-player games, I would rather sit down with one other person and play a game and be able to have a conversation with that person and also pay attention to the game and all that other stuff. Whereas party games for me, like I know why people like them and I enjoy my time with them. I just would choose to, if my heart calls to me and says, what are we going to do? You can do either one. My heart is going to go to that 2-player experience.
Younger, boozier Josh would never turn down a game of Quelf or Dice Capades. Younger Josh would pick party games, but current Josh picks 2-player games because that's how he plays games now. And I enjoy it. I enjoy it very much. Like, whether it's playing games with my wife or now playing Keyforge with my buddy, a lot. Even today we played 2 games. It's a great personal, connection. So, I miss party games for sure, but, 2-player games is what I would pick out of those 2.
Awesome. I feel us coming back together, Josh. I feel us growing closer to one another again.
We're back together.
All right. So, Josh.
Until now.
Next question for you, sir. Do you prefer to teach games to someone or do you prefer to learn games from someone?
So this is interesting. I prefer teaching games, but my friends also are very quick to, like, if I bring a game, to grab the rulebook and to decide they're the person that always gets stuck reading the rules when I'm like, dude, you took that rule book away from me. I was going to do it. So like when we play 2-player games, I teach the games to my wife while we play or while we were like reviewing. I enjoy it. There's pet peeves like when people are on their phones or not listening.
Right.
But I'm also learning games while I'm teaching them. So, I don't do it. So to differentiate between maybe what you're going to say and what I'm saying is, I'm not the type of person who typically will sit down in advance of playing a game and learning the rules, and I think that's something that you do, or at least you have done. Like I did that with Wasteland Express Delivery Service, and we never played it. And I was like, I wasted my time. Next, like I prefer to sit down, open a game, and learn by teaching, if that makes sense.
Right. What I mean by learning games is that someone else is teaching you how to play it.
Okay, yeah. So
would you rather teach the game? What's that?
I'd rather teach the game.
Okay. So for me, and this is what's hard, right? I would rather learn the game from someone else. I would much, much rather have someone else tell me what to do. However, I have discovered, like, if I'm playing a 4-player game and I know how to play it and one other person knows how to play it and 2 people don't, I am the worst person when that other person tries to teach the game. Because if they try to teach it in a way that I wouldn't teach it, I can't get over, like, I have to actively tell myself not to say anything unless they like make a huge rule error or something like that. For whatever reason, when it comes to teaching games, I feel I'm very, I don't want to say possessive, but I'm usually the person who does it. In all of my play groups that have ever existed, I'm usually the person who teaches. So when someone else does it, if they don't do it the way I want them to, I have to like tell myself to stop, like not to say anything. And I do, like, I don't interrupt them. I don't tell them they're doing it wrong. Like I don't do any of those things, but internally, I'm like wrestling with really wanting to say something about what they should be doing and teaching. So that's the only reason, like, I prefer to learn. Like my heart says, like, just let someone else do it. But if I know the game, it's really hard for me. Then my heart like breaks.
Yeah.
So my heart says learn, but if I already know the game and someone else is teaching it, then my heart breaks. So that's my answer.
Your answer is neither.
Correct.
Or both.
Both and neither.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. All right. So 3rd-person games or 1st-person games? Which do you love?
Well, if you look back at all of my multiplayer gaming experiences, like right now I play a lot of Overwatch, played a lot of Call of Duty, played a lot of Halo, did a lot of those things, right? But the answer for me is actually my heart loves 3rd-person games. I really enjoy single-player games, even though obviously we just talked about I love multiplayer. But I like being able to see myself, darn it. I like when I can see myself or the character I'm controlling on the screen. There's something about that I enjoy. There's something about that increases my connection to that character. I love 3rd-person games. Far, far more than 1st-person games, even though I probably play way more 1st-person games.
I also love 3rd-person games because I feel like when we play a 1st-person game, I love plenty of 1st-person games, but in comparison to a 3rd-person game, I really feel like you're missing something out of the story because you don't get to see your character. So I really enjoy that aspect. I really feel more, so like you could argue like 1st-person should make you feel more involved in the story. Like you're the character.
Right.
And I get that. But I feel more into the story because I know I'm not in the story.
Right.
I'm role playing. I'm playing a character, not myself.
Right.
So when I play a 3rd-person game, I really feel way more connected to the story. So yeah, 3rd-person games, since 1995, since I was playing Silent Hill and Resident Evil, like it's always been 3rd-person.
Excellent.
Preference.
All right. Wrapping up your last 3 as we go. Oh boy. All right.
These can be quick.
These are going to be quick.
I even deleted one.
Yeah. All right. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars. I just threw these in because I figured we could rapid fire them. Star Wars. I never connected with Star Trek. My dad watched it when I was a kid. He would watch Next Generation, and I would watch them with him occasionally. But as a kid, they were just very boring. I know that it's definitely changed, and I enjoy the movies for what they are now, the recent ones. I haven't watched Discovery, but Star Wars is my childhood and my adulthood, so Star Wars.
Gotcha. My wife adores Star Trek. Absolutely loves it. Thinks Star Trek is superior to Star Wars in every way, shape, and form. I am pretty indifferent about both. So if I had to pick one, I would pick Star Wars just because I prefer the movies more. But like, sure. I know nothing of the extended universe. Like, to tell you how much I like Star Wars, I thought episode 8 was great. I thought it was really good. I was like, this movie's wonderful. And then apparently, if you're an actual Star Wars fan, that's not an opinion you're allowed to have. I didn't know that. So clearly, I must not be an actual Star Wars fan.
Well, let's not anger the Star Wars fans.
Like I said, I'm not apparently, so it's fine. But yeah, so I'm pretty indifferent to both. But if I had to pick one, I'd pick Star Wars.
Okay. Well, now you have to pick another one. Monopoly or Munchkin?
Monopoly. It's really isn't that close for me.
I figured they're both games that cause people to hate each other. So.
Yeah.
There's equal backstabbing, I think, in both games.
That's true. There definitely is.
But the point of Munchkin is to backstab.
Right.
And the point of Monopoly isn't necessarily it's to make deals, not to backstab.
Right.
Yeah. So I also pick Monopoly in that category.
Because you like to backstab people, that's not the point.
I'm much better at Monopoly than I am at Munchkin.
Yeah, I'm horrible at Munchkin. I'm so bad at that game. Oh, it's rough. All right. And the final, but probably most important question, Kevin Austin or Justin Warner?
I did write this, so I shouldn't be like wavering. But I know Kevin Austin.
Right.
He's always shown up for me. I'm not entirely convinced Justin Warner is a person. So I have to pick Kevin Austin, right?
So here's the thing. I've met Kevin Austin.
Yeah.
He's the only PSVG person I've met in person. So the beauty of this question, though, is that since they're the same person, I don't need to pick either one of them. I pick them both. I pick them both. I've met Kevin Austin. I own Justin Warner's cookbook. I'll go with both.
You should have had him sign that book.
I should have had him sign it when that was a good idea. I should have done that. All right. Well, hey, we hope that you enjoyed our little topic of the show, talking about the things that we love on Valentine's Day. If you had a particular little duo there that you have a strong feeling about, you should let us know what your feelings were, which one you love more, or just in general, what you're loving on Valentine's Day. We'd love to hear it at Board with VG on Twitter. Speaking of at Board with VG on Twitter, Josh, I think we got some listener questions there.
We do have a few listener questions / thoughts to cover. Remember, you can hit us up at boardwithvg or at that email address, boardwithvg@gmail.com, or on our Discord. We'll start with Paul Calicote at pcalico84. Tweeted us, how did the Bakugan research go? Kyle?
So I did do some research on Bakugan.
Oh, interesting. Did you do it today when you saw his question?
No, I didn't. I actually did it right after that podcast when he had asked the question about it. And I got as far as getting really confused about what was going on, and then I quit. Because I was like, oh, I'm going to check out this card game. So then I started looking it up, but then I wasn't certain if like Bakugan Attack, and then it seems like there was multiple of them. So then I wasn't certain like what exactly was going on. And then I looked it up on Board Game Geek, and on Board Game Geek, there's like Bakugan Battle Brawlers, which is a game from 2006 that has a rating of 4.8, which is like 16,000 something. It's like worse than like Phase 10, I think. So I was like, well, I don't know if that's the one he's talking. So I got really confused as I was going through about what exactly I was supposed to be looking for. But I think it's Bakugan Battle Brawlers is the game. And then I was like, oh, this is cool because, you can get it on Amazon for really cheap. It's $2.30, but it doesn't qualify for Amazon or for free shipping. So then you have to pay like $9 for shipping when the game's only supposed to be $9.99. So that didn't help. So I was like, oh, darn it. So I did try to do some research, and then there's a WikiHow page about how to play it in 14 steps. But then like while you like look through it, like there's like, I think not actual art from Bakugan. I think maybe some of them are, but like one of the cards is drawn and it looks like a Charizard. Like, I don't know exactly what's going on. So I did genuinely try to do some research, Paul. I apologize. I just got really confused, and I was like, I don't know anymore. So I did try. I definitely tried.
Well, Paul, I did not do any research. I was at Walmart the other day, and I did see Bakugan toys, which are not cards at all.
Right. There's a lot of stuff about the anime.
Yeah. So I noticed it, and I thought of the podcast. So like you infected me somehow, but I didn't do anything more than walk past them. So
maybe next
sorry.
time, next time, walk past, take one off, look at it, read a bit about it, and then put it back.
We'll see. I don't go in.
Small
I don't.
steps.
I enjoy going in Walmart often, so I don't know when the next time is I'll be in there.
Gotcha. Just trying to make small improvements.
Yeah. All right. The next question is actually a paraphrased portion of a conversation I had with Lucas Rose on Discord. He asked, technically, and the question I formed it, have either of you played Gwent, and what are your opinions? And I think you even contributed to his question as well while in Discord. Have you played Gwent? What do you think about it?
So I played Gwent when I played The Witcher 3. So that was the only real interaction I had. And I didn't play The Witcher 3 for very long. So I played a little bit of Gwent from that, but that was like the only time I played it. It seemed kind of cool. Like I enjoyed my time with it. I'm actually really interested. Is it Thornbreaker? Is that the RPG that's based on Gwent?
Was not Thorn Watch?
Or I can't remember.
I'm not sure. Okay.
What it is. But anyway, there was like that full basically RPG that was released that is based around Gwent per se, that they changed it a little bit, I think. Like I'm interested in that because I like what I played of Gwent. I really enjoyed. And it was actually, I know people would be really upset. It was actually my favorite part of The Witcher 3 was playing Gwent. Which I, in fairness, maybe did not give the game a fair shake, and I still own it. So I do plan someday to go back and play it. But yeah, I really, like I said, what I played of it, I enjoyed. I really struggle with sitting down to play digital card games with any regularity. Like I really want to, but for whatever reason, anytime I sit down to play a digital card game, I feel like I should be playing something else. And I don't know why that is. Like I really enjoy MTG Arena. I have enjoyed the Elder Scrolls card game. Like all of those I've really enjoyed. But anytime I start playing them, I'm like, I really shouldn't be getting like deep into these. And maybe it's just me trying to prevent my Magic addiction from happening again and buying all of those cards. But yeah, I mean, I think Gwent's pretty cool and I would like to play more of it. I just haven't.
Okay, cool. Well, I told Lucas I do have it on the Xbox. And I will download it and give him like a generic review about what I think of the game at some point. So maybe next week I'll be able to talk about Gwent a little bit.
Well, if you have it on Xbox, then I have it on Xbox.
Yes, you should also have it. Yeah. Okay. So those are all of our questions.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much for writing into us, folks. As always, if you have other questions or suggested topics, be sure to reach out to us on the social medias. We really appreciate it. And while we are a gaming podcast, we always like to wrap our show up with a little recommendation that's helping us live a well-rounded life. This is just something that we're doing outside of gaming that we're enjoying and thinking and we think is helping us be a little more balanced in how we approach life. Josh, what are you enjoying or would you like to recommend to the dear listener this week?
So this week I tweeted out today asking people what their suggestions for a well-rounded life are. So I'm going to read 2 listener responses as my well-rounded life. We'll start with Paul Calico.
I will say I admire your ability to delegate your responsibilities. Nicely done.
Well, it wasn't planned. It just was a spur of the moment. But I mean, it is what it is. So with the lighter of the 2, we'll start with Paul. Paul Calico says, my tip for a well-rounded life is buy yourself a toy. Lego set, G1 reissue Transformer or something. Every now and then, let your inner child play a little bit. That is a good recommendation, I would say. Why not, right? I mean, I kind of consider board game as my like toy.
Yeah, I know that's kind of where I am too. Because every time I'm going to buy like something, because I think about all the time like buying like other things to like put it in my podcasting room or to hang up on the walls, or like especially for me, it tends to be like Overwatch memorabilia stuff. And I'm always like, or I could just use that money and buy a game. But I fully endorse buying toys. Toys are cool.
Yeah. I think I'll take Paul's advice. Next time I'm in Target with the little kid, I'll go down the Marvel aisle or something and pick up a toy to put in front of my monitors that I look at while we record. Tell my wife that it's okay because it's for the podcast.
That's right.
And then the second one we got was from Splig at Dobelicious on Twitter. Splig just went through a tough time, and he says, my tip is to talk to people, especially all caps, family. Open up and be real. As gamers, many of us can and do use that as an escape to run from hard feelings or tough situations. Clamming up and burying things, both good or bad, only creates more issues later on. Counseling is good. Responding with not okay, but how you actually feel when asked how you are is a good start. And then he continues, like, you can take what you want out of that and spin it to other things as you see fit, mental health, relationships, etc., and not just in reference to the grieving process. Basically, feelings are okay. Don't use a hobby as an escape life, which is awesome advice, and I think advice that most people can relate to and have experienced. And I know I for sure have buried my emotions in video games, and it's a real easy way to escape something that's tough and real. So I think that's great advice. Talk to someone. It doesn't even have to be someone that you know very well. That's what the internet is great about. You can just kind of talk to anybody, and lots of people are willing to listen. So Thanks both Paul and Splig for the advice.
That is some great suggestions on both. One a little lighthearted, one a little more serious, but that's exactly the kind of things we're looking for when it comes to living a well-rounded life. My recommendation is going to be a little bit on the lighter side, but not really super lighter side. I mean, lighter as in something you watch, not lighter as in the subject matter is light. And I believe you recommended this back in like December, right?
Yeah, we talked about it. I don't remember when, but not.
But yeah, you talked about it earlier. So often I try to take the recommendations that Josh has and try to, put them in my Netflix queue or whatever it is when it's something to watch. And I have been, as I talked about earlier, I've been feeling under the weather, so I've missed some work here and there. And also, my wife has been playing Kingdom Hearts 3 like ridiculous. She's at 60 hours right now.
Oof.
Right. So I've had a lot of time with the television while she has the television with the gaming systems. So I watched The Innocent Man on Netflix. It's a docuseries based on the John Grisham book. It's his only fiction book he's ever written. Or nonfiction book, excuse me, that he's ever. I always confuse those things.
Yeah, me too.
Oh my gosh. I know. Yeah, it's the only nonfiction book he's ever written. And it's basically about some incidents that happened in a small town in Ada, Oklahoma. And talks kind of follows the incidents there, the folks who were convicted for it, and basically, as the title says, maybe some folks who were wrongly convicted for it. Now, this is different than, and I think it's important to talk about it. Like, Making a Murderer got really big when it came out, but there was no definitive answers in Making a Murderer about what exactly happened in that scenario, right? People were like, oh, this seems like a miscarriage of the criminal justice system. But, and maybe it was, like, I think if you watch that, there's probably some things that maybe shouldn't have gone the way they were supposed to. I think the difference here is that there is some technology that is used that did not exist in the early 80s when these incidents happened, that happened much later, to not spoil things, about kind of the way things worked. And it's just a really interesting way to look at the criminal justice system, how folks who maybe depending on your status in life and how you interact with the criminal justice system might be different. I am someone who, did my undergrad in criminal justice and sociology. So that was my focus. So I always find these things to be very, very fascinating. So if you are want to look at something that is very interesting and that is going to probably have you feeling things, I highly recommend The Innocent Man. They do a really good job, because I remember when Josh said it, that he watched it after like the first episode or two. He was like, yeah.
So what?
So what? Like, these guys did this thing and it was pretty bad. It got us kind of start out that way, and then it very much doesn't finish that way. So I definitely recommend The Innocent Man on Netflix. I also, I'm not probably going to use this for a recommendation, because I don't know if I totally enjoyed it, but I did watch the Ted Bundy tapes, little docuseries. And as a small critique to this series, I thought it was interesting. I liked what they did. I liked all the places they go. Did you watch it?
I'm halfway through.
Okay.
I just finished episode 2.
I think it's interesting that they call it the Ted Bundy tapes, because they very, very rarely actually play the Ted Bundy tapes.
It's a weird glorification of Ted Bundy, I find so far. He's a fascinating person, but he's also a monster. So it's weird watching it, because I'm fascinated by the story, but they're painting him out to be Paul McCartney and not John Wayne Gacy. Like, they're trying to make him seem like this person, like, wasn't he so clever? Isn't he so handsome? Isn't he so charming? Didn't he do all these awesome things? Like, no, he was a monster.
He was a monster, but he was those other things too.
Well, yeah, but still, like, it's just a weird.
It is very weird.
The context of the show is very bizarre. Like, it's not what I thought, because like Netflix is like, don't watch this alone, and I'm like, oh, this will be interesting. No, you could watch this at 2 a.m. and be fine by yourself.
It was definitely far less graphic than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
it wasn't like super
it's not scary.
No,
it's creepy. He's creepy. Yeah. He's a creepy guy.
He's a super creepy guy. It's just really weird because I thought, they made this big deal. We have these hundreds and hundreds of hours of tapes from him,
and then, like, let's build a documentary around these segments we clip out.
I know, and then like each episode has like maybe 3 or 4 minutes of actual like tape played. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, it's different.
All right. Well, anyway, that's our well-rounded life recommendations. Josh, what do you say we wrap this show up?
Let's do it. Thank you for joining us, everyone. In addition to finding us on Twitter and Instagram at Board with VG, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Board with VG. So feel free to swing by, give us a 5-star rating over there. You can do that on iTunes as well. Also, if you want to communicate in more long form or you're not feeling social media, feel free to email us at boardwithvg@gmail.com. Make sure you use that hashtag boardwithvg, so we can see what you guys are up to. Whatever podcast service you're listening to us on, we encourage you to give us a stellar rating. That is, whether you're downloading us from the PSVG feed, the new Dice Tower Network feed, or our standalone Board with VG feed. You cannot escape us. You can find me on PlayStation Network or Xbox Live at Why So Serious. That's SIRRIUS. If you want to be friends, please just send me a message that says BWVG or something. Because my inboxes are just full of
getting a lot of bots again.
Bots all over the place. So just let me know you're a human being, and we'll be friends and we can play games together. Kyle, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, Board Game Geek, all at Psychocross, CYCOCROSS. As I mentioned at the top of the show, PSVG is on Patreon, so I want to give a brief thank you to all of our Patreon producers, Coach Hulk, Edwin Kahlo, Devin Tyus, Kevin Austin, Chris M., Bonesaw, Barry Cathcart, and please, Barry, let me know if I'm pronouncing your name even remotely close to correctly, and Paul Calicut. We thank you so much for your support over there. Because of you help make all the things PSVG does possible, and we truly, truly appreciate it. As always, if you have suggestions for future topics, be sure to reach out to us on the social media, because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. And remember, everyone, whether it be board games or video games, never stop gaming.